Hello, thank you for joining us again. Jen Lipsey, CEO with the Association of Child Life Professionals. I am joined this morning by Genevieve Lowry, who I'm going to ask to introduce herself. I'm sure she doesn't need much of an introduction. I know you're known in the community for all your great contributions, but I'm going to hand this over to you to go ahead and just share with the audience kind of your evolution in the practice of child life.
All right. Well, I am a certified child life specialist. I've been one since 1990. I worked for, 20 some years in a clinical setting, mostly in New York City in a general medicine unit, then on a pediatric hematology oncology. At that point, after having my second child, I decided I wanted to use my skills in a way that was different than working in a hospital. So I left a job that I loved very much and decided to think about ways that I could be a child life specialist in the community. And I started looking at working in prison settings and homeless shelters. And a lot of that really was volunteer work, which was fine with me at the time. I also started an online platform where I do the certification test prep class, and I do that with Megan Kelly. That has expanded into on-demand webinars. And that has introduced me to so many people across the country because it was an online platform, which has been really interesting also. And then at the same time and simultaneously, I have always been a part of the Bank Street College community, and I currently am full-time faculty there teaching in the Child Life program, Child Life students in a fully online format. I also teach child development in the teaching and learning department as well, which is kind of a fascinating to be right now too.
Yeah, sure. So Bank Street is fully online. When did it make that transition? Because that was in place before having to react to this pandemic.
Thank God. Yeah. Thank goodness. And I like to think that we've also become, so that, just to answer your question, that happened maybe 4 or 5 years ago. It was done partially kicking and screaming, but I've really come to love it. I feel like I know my students really well in the online platform, which has helped me during this time right now, during this pandemic, to be able to feel really comfortable to reach out to my students and say, what do you need? And for them to also reach out to me and say, this is what I need from you.
Sure.
We're a pretty tight community, both present student populations and the alumni. And actually, I think most child life academics are somewhat of a tight community as well, as we are struggling to navigate the needs of our students as those that are on campus platforms move to online platforms, and we can be of support and service to those educators also.
Mm-hmm. What was the kicking and screaming about 5 years ago to get from? Because I know that is not a controversial topic, but I think that there are some that still believe firmly in the traditional face-to-face only type of environment for teaching and learning. But, then with all the advances in technology and various curriculum formats, there's also this movement to that virtual teaching and learning is just as effective. So just wondering what that process was like for you all to go from traditional to online.
I think it was really difficult to envision what it would look like. And even with my own experiences of teaching online, it was hard to envision how will I teach those very hands-on sensory experiences in a platform that doesn't always allow for that feels like it doesn't allow for those senses. Now, when people say face-to-face, I will challenge that language because you and I right now are face-to-face.
Yes, good point. Yes.
We're not breathing the same air, so to speak, but we are face-to-face with one another. And, I do the same thing with my students that I would have done in an on-campus format. It's not the same. it's different. It's not good. It's not bad. It's just different. I have to envision those activities that I did in an online, on campus. I have to use my own language, in an on-campus platform, and think about what are the goals of that activity? What are the goals? What are the goals I want my students to leave this course with? What information do they need? And then I envision what will that look like in an online platform. I actually think that, and I apologize to those students that were in my on-campus courses as I say this. I think they are doing great, and I think those classes were wonderful. But I think my online classes are much better.
Interesting.
I co-teach a class. One of the courses I teach is medical aspects of illness, a child life perspective, and I co-teach that with a pediatric nurse practitioner. And when we taught it on campus, it took almost the full 2 hours of every class to go over just the medical backgrounds and understanding and learning about the disease processes. That there wasn't always a ton of space and room. I had to weave it in there, like threading a needle to
Sure.
try and figure out where the child life preparation and coping and where that stuff would fit. Now I got all week. Now I got a whole week's worth. And it's not just 2 hours once a week. It's every day I interact, I converse, I talk with, I share, I do a video, I communicate. Every day I am online with my students.
Well, thank goodness for that, because I can only imagine that during all the kind of unpredictable things going on right now, having a lifeline and a consistency, like your familiar face, the curriculum, the courses, each other, the student peer community is probably a very strong life preserve, if that's the right word, in terms of just having that consistency and you as like an anchor in an online format, I think is got to be helpful for your students. In what ways have your convenient classroom or your Bank Street education had to change with what's going on with the coronavirus? Or what if any trends have you heard from your students, I guess, or from?
I think that the biggest challenge right now for both the convenient classroom and for our students at Bank Street is that many of the students are unable to complete their internships.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, lives have been put on hold. And I don't know. We don't know what that's going to look like when it comes back.
Yeah.
And students sort of feel a little lost.
Sure.
In that process, and trying to figure out how do we support them emotionally, psychologically, and educationally. How are we supporting them so they still feel like they're growing and they're learning, so that they don't feel like they're losing ground.
Sure.
And at the same time, how do we balance that with this level of uncertainty of, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know how this is going to play itself out. I have what's out of my control is how internship sites will respond. Will they take students back? And even if they do take students back, can students go back?
Right.
Many students, this isn't news to anybody, many students uproot their lives to do an internship.
Mm-hmm.
And when that internship gets cut short and they have to leave it, we don't know, not under any fault of their own, but under circumstances that are beyond our control. And for safety and good reasons, those things happened. But it's up to us as a profession to sort of think about, how do we carry forth the next generation of child life specialists? How are we supporting them? Because that plays out in how they then support children and families. How we take care of the upcoming group of students is important to how then they play that forward when they have students in their programs, when they become child life specialists? Will we lose some of them? Will they not be able to come back? Have they invested in a future that they can't finish? And what does that mean? What does that say about us? The convenient classroom is adjacent to all of this. Honestly, I hadn't even thought about it much until you mentioned it, because it sort of happens around testing dates. So I have these lulls in between, but nobody is signing up because no one's completed the course. No one's completed their internships. We talk a lot about the barriers to child life, and I think this also will create even wider gaps for those that already had barriers in place. Right. It's going to create even more gaps. We don't know how many internships are going to be in the fall. We don't know what that will look like in the spring if this comes back again, and the precautions that will be put in place. We need to start thinking now about ways that we can support students, ways that we can, what are the alternatives? Sure. What are the ways that we can give back those hours? How do we find them for students? Sure. How do we support students? Maybe we open up to more non-traditional settings to supplement those hours. Maybe we really have to start thinking bigger, and we have to start thinking more broadly about the internship program. Maybe that's part of what's happening now, is that we really push ourselves to imagine. And maybe it's crazy. Maybe, I will admit I am a big picture out there ideas person. But what I find is if you put that giant idea out there, people will take that and they'll bring it down to something that is doable and manageable, but that is still innovative and different from what we were doing before. And that will still feel true to who we are as a profession and as a group of people that really just want to do good. Yeah. I mean, that is the essence of who we are, isn't it?
Yes.
We're just a bunch of do-gooders.
Doing good for everyone. Yeah. I know. Well, and your big picture thinking and that willingness to go outside the box and be imaginative is why we consider you such an asset to the community, why we want you to be part of this think tank preparation that's going to be happening in July, now virtually, to discuss the current internship process and challenges, now exacerbated by the fact that hospitals have closed. Their current winter, spring, and I think summer are in question now, internships and practicums. What we are hearing from the Internship Coordinators Forum is that most of the coordinators and program leaders have every intention of taking their interns back when it's safe to do so. But again, the uncertainty of when that's going to be remains up for grabs. Does seem like the trend is including many programs not considering the fall as an option to open up a practicum or internship. I think, the delay in wanting to complete those internships that they've made offers to and commitments to that are now paused. I think most programs are planning on seeing those commitments out, which means they won't open up their fall, which again compounds this back up into the internship, this coveted internship that I know is so stressful to everyone involved, which is why we wanted to look at it from its typical pathway. The beginning of this year, we're still going to be looking at that in July, but also now incorporating, this disrupted cohort. And I'm sure you're aware of it, that CLCC our certification commission has received a volume of pleas and heartbreaking stories. And I mean, these students are taking time to share 3-4 pages of their entire, from the moment they learned about child life through the courses they chose, why they chose them. It's their entire reason for entering the profession.
Because most of us believe it's a calling.
Yes. And I can see that. I mean, it is a profession of complete dedication and sacrifice. And you can read it in these letters and CLCC has not had an easy choice or decision to make in upholding the 600 hours for their reasons. Now, ACLP's commitment is to provide the support to try and galvanize, just as you've done, the certifying community. Those that are certified, qualified, and especially have provided supervision in the past, we are calling upon them to be prepared to take in any intern that can't be accepted back into their original program for whatever reason. And now that doesn't solve that challenge that you brought up about if and when internships open up their doors again, can that student now financially afford to relocate, travel, et cetera? Where can our community provide support in that ways? What can we call upon our community to maybe either donate financially or donate in time, energy, mentorship? CLCC did say that they are willing to leave it to the internship coordinator's discretion to determine what kind of virtual options they might be able to put in place to engage their interns still, but still provide that quality learning that they expect from your typical internship structure. But without knowing exactly how long and what's going to be in play, it's hard for CLCC to make any kind of changes to their requirements on a global change for everyone. And we've been in touch with the Institute for Credentialing Excellence and seeing how is the credentialing industry handling all of these changes across credentials, licensing, et cetera. And the ICE is basically saying that whatever changes are made are basically typically made for the credential holders, those that are already actively certified, as opposed to changing any of the eligibility requirements to become certified. So we're keeping in touch with that community to just see, because we know we're not the only ones dealing with this kind of jarring disruption to many. But it doesn't obviously prevent or make it any easier for the students or for you, our academic CCLSs that are, just desperately trying to support and advocate on behalf of your students.